So I felt super compelled to make this video about Acolyte specifically. Say what you want about Star Wars, Book of Boba Fett, Rise of Skywalker sequels, movies, ass. Terrible movies, right? But The Acolyte. Why was The Acolyte so good? Okay, I'll tell you why. Short and sweet. Revenge of the Sith was a movie about Anakin Skywalker repressing his emotions on the instructions and teachings of the Jedi Order. Hence Yoda explaining the understanding of what fear leads to the dark side, right? And we see it with Master Soul. He is very fearful of allowing May, of allowing Osha to turn to the dark side as her sister did. Right? She's so worried that he does all these things. He hides so much stuff from her that he essentially pushes her away to the point where she feels like the only way she can feel better is to force choke this man to death. Where else did we see that? Revenge of the Sith. We see that with Revenge of the Sith when Anakin just about force choked Padme to death after he slaughtered millions. Let's be honest. He committed a genocide. This is what he did. It is pointing to the fact that the Jedi Order is not perfect, and it never was perfect at any point in any of the films that we have seen, specifically the prequels. When it comes to the fact that Qui-Gon Jinn had extreme disdain for the Council because of the fact that they had all these outdated rules and policies that didn't allow the Jedi Order to be progressive. Funny enough, the progressive mindset is what's destroying Star Wars, is the woke DEI mindset, right? Is what people are so upset about, right? And I don't see how fans aren't getting the irony. But anyways, the whole point was to show that the Jedi Order was in fact not this holy, perfect order of missionary religious Jedi, right? You had a lot of people like Master Soul, you had a lot of people like Venestra or whatever that green person's name was. You had people like that would reflect their own fears to their Padawans and repress their Padawans' emotions to the point where they felt nothing, where they felt like they couldn't feel anything. And we see this in the prequels. I don't see why people don't understand that. It's the most prominent in the prequels, specifically with Anakin's story. And that's just getting to the themes of the story. We're not even really talking about, Plagueis and what that really means. But let's get into that a little bit, right? People don't understand that by the genetic tree, Palpatine's granddaughter is Rey, right, which was revealed to us in the sequels, right? Anakin is the son of Palpatine, right, making Anakin the uncle of Rey in the Force. Follow me. For whatever reason, people don't understand that when Palpatine was explaining how he could create life, how Darth Plagueis the Wise taught a young person, himself, how to create life, Palpatine was explaining how he created Anakin. He was explaining how he influenced the midichlorians to form inside of Shmi and birth Anakin, okay? Which makes Palpatine the father, illegitimately. We see in the Acolyte that the dyad in the Force, something similar that we've seen with Kylo Ren and Rey, Palpatine. The dyad in the Force, the twins, right, were created from unknown source, but with the aid of Plagueis. Now, why are so many people pissed about this? My only understanding is that they believe Plagueis should never be in the show because he's not born yet. I didn't know Plagueis had a birth date. This is the first time we're seeing him in live action series. He was in Legends. Whatever was in Legends is Legends. It doesn't his birthday in Legends isn't his birthday in canon. Same with anyone else. If they're in Legends, canon storyline has nothing to do with Legends, so leave it alone, right? Further than that, him training Chimere is actually perfect because he's not training Palpatine. Palpatine wouldn't be born yet if this is 100 years before 100 years before the prequels, right? So I don't see why people are getting so. I understand why people are upset with the creators of the show, Leslie Headland, with the rhetoric that they throw out explaining that they don't care about fans. I think that's a very toxic thing to do when you're creating a story that is very close to a lot of people's hearts. But at the same time, this story was close to Leslie's heart. So who are we to say that this story is invalid, right? If I was creating a story for Star Wars, it would be my story for Star Wars, not another fan's, not Legends. It would be mine, right? So watch it or don't kind of thing. If you don't watch it, you don't have to like it, right? If you don't like it, don't watch it. If you like it, then it is what it is, right? But going further into why the Acolyte was so good, okay? The next one that I'm going to say is this was the first time that we've seen a kyber crystal bled and corrupted in live action, okay? And why is that a big deal? A big let's say plot hole that I heard was if Anakin was killing all these younglings, how come his kyber crystal didn't bleed and didn't get corrupted from all his hatred? For one, Anakin was not specifically pouring his hatred into the lightsaber. I'm sure if he was, then it probably would have happened, if that's what Lucas wanted. Further than that, you clearly see in the Acolyte that when the lightsaber is thrown, it's cracked and chipped, and it reveals the kyber crystal, right? Meaning that in order to bleed a kyber crystal and corrupt the kyber crystal, you would need to have it exposed. It would need to be exposed, and then you could pour your hatred into this kyber crystal. From what we've seen so far, I think the first, probably canon thing that we've seen when it comes to corrupting a lightsaber. And this, there's obviously Darth Vader comics that speak otherwise. I'm going to point towards Jedi Survivor, where Cal Kestis witnesses Dagan Gera corrupting his kyber crystal from yellow to red. And that should be a very exciting thing for someone that's a Star Wars fan and has played the Jedi Survivor games. Because of pointing that out, we could be seeing more things when it comes to canon lore and possibly seeing a hidden Jedi Order somewhere. Like so many different possibilities. But this is why Acolyte is so important, because it points to the imbalance in the Jedi Order, whereas the Sith had imbalance because they were so bent on achieving that power and achieving that next level of power, right? The power of two, right? That is why the Sith never prevailed, because of the fact there's always going to be someone trying to crave that power and claim that power. Whereas in the Jedi Order, their unbalance comes from not allowing themselves to feel their emotions and to use the instinct from those emotions to judge their actions, right? In the sense of loving someone and procreation and hatred and fear, like they don't allow themselves to feel these things because they feel that they can be closer to the Force without having to feel these things. We've seen it many times now that doesn't work. Neither side works. In Jedi Survivor, we see Cal Kestis embrace the dark side and allow him to become a very dangerous individual because he doesn't limit himself to certain teachings, right? He sees it almost as important to understand these teachings and depict it and dissect it for himself, so then he can understand what he is and isn't capable of, And that being said, if Cal Kestis would be the next Grand Master of the next hidden Jedi Order, we could be seeing a Jedi Order that is meant to be who they are, right? They are fulfilling the balance of the Force, right? And that was even in Legends. We can go into Legends here as well. We talk about the birth of the Jedi and the Sith, of how, if you were too enveloped in the light side, you'd get sent to a moon that was strictly embedded in the dark side of the Force. And if you were so far gone in the dark side of the Force, then you'd be sent to a moon that was immersed in the light side of the Force. And why is that important? Well, it's important because if you are not able to step outside of yourself and see the perspective of someone else, right, and see the perspective of how they view things, then you will always be destined for failure. And that's true in life, not just in the TV series and the movies. If you are not able to step outside of yourself and see things from someone else's perspective, you will always be doomed for failure, right? Because you're not allowing yourself to learn. You're not allowing yourself to coexist and socialize. You're not allowing yourself to accept other people just because they believe differently from you, right? And ultimately, that is this story. That is what we see, not just in Acolyte, but across Star Wars. We see that balance. It's a constant war going on of differing sides in politics. So when we can truly live on a plane where we aren't teeter-tottering on each side, but we can remain balanced and indifferent, you're not so biased on just one side. You can really open your mind and choose things for yourself. That is what we should strive to be doing. And I'm just getting sick of all the people saying that Acolyte was a terrible show. And that just goes to show you the depth people will go, or people won't go, right? They won't go so far as to see why it could have been a good message for people. They aren't willing to see past the DEI. They're not willing to see past the unfavorable plot twists that they don't agree with, right? And for me, that makes me feel better as a fan, that I can dissect things that other people like Star Wars Theory might not see, right? And that is just telling of the person and their character, right? Of how they view not just themselves, but others, Like, something that super pisses me off with Star Wars Theory is how he can make all these fan-made, fan-funded projects, right? And as soon as someone else makes a different project, especially someone that owns the rights to the project, he can criticize them, not really criticize them, but straight up bash them for giving a different perspective of a show or a series that doesn't belong to him, right? And whatever it is, like, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to critique. What I'm saying is they shouldn't be shooting down someone else's stories and someone else's perspective just because it doesn't fit with them, right? Just because you don't like it, right? I feel like as if I had a platform as big as that, I wouldn't be using it in a way that diminishes any other person's work that they've done. I think if he wants to cover it, I think it's very fair to critique it and have his own views and point of his own perspective about why the Acolyte didn't work, you know. But I think once it gets personal to where you don't even take the time to dissect different scenes and you just straight up say, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense at all. This doesn't. Some people do understand it. Some people, it makes sense to them. You know, it makes sense of why Soul would, you know, be force choked at the end of the show, because he has lied about his Padawan's family her entire life. So of course she's gonna be pissed off. Like, things that make sense to some people might not make sense to you, and that's fine. But why do you have to degrade someone else just to get your point across? And I'm going to be off my soapbox here because it's definitely a longer video than I thought. But if you guys liked the show, explain why. If you didn't like the show, explain why. But don't just bash each other. Don't just say that, oh, you're not a true Star Wars fan if you like this show. You're not a true Star Wars fan if you think that this is going in the right direction. To clarify, I do not feel that The Acolyte was the best thing that we've gotten since the prequels. What I do feel is that it was a very valid piece to the whole puzzle. It made sense, things connected. Some people didn't like it, and that's fine. That's my soapbox.